Good evening. Oh, that smile has a reason. All week we've had a very serious time here. Especially serious because I believe that this week's work is the deepest work we've had since the beginning of our work. It may be the only deep work we'll have, or it may be the beginning of a new era. And so I have probably not felt too much like smiling all week, but tonight I can't help it. I'm reminded that there are, lighter sides to our work sometime. And one day I was in my office in my home in Honolulu, and I was reading a letter from a lady who decided that she would like to have a family, but the doctor said it was impossible. And so she wanted to know if I could help her. And I was thinking about that. And the telephone bell rang. And it was a lady who was about to have a family and didn't want one and wanted to know what I could do about it. And other things like that have happened. But in the course of this spiritual journeyings, it has so happened that divine grace has set aside these laws of conception at times. And so today I received word from South Africa that I'm the proud papa of a 5.5-pound baby. We have a Chinese Joel, and we have a Japanese Joel, and now we have a South African Joel, and there are quite a few other Joels around this country. And so a little humor comes into the situation on a on a day when it's very necessary. It is strange, the nature of the work. You'd be surprised how many times the mail and the telephone to an outsider listening in would believe that I'm a physician. The diagnosis, the physical diagnosis, is always so accurate, so complete. And at other times you would imagine that this is some kind of a magical operation. I had a beer salesman come in one time and wanted help to increase his business. Well, behind all of that is another serious note. Because in our work, none of that enters into the spiritual life or spiritual practice, and yet every single bit of that falls into its rightful place when you understand that the calls that come don't really mean what they say. They are decoys, more or less. When we are called upon for help, the nature of that help may appear to be a sick person wanting to be well, poor person wanting to be supplied, unemployed person wanting to be employed, or a family without a family desiring one. But actually, what we're being called on for is a demonstration of the presence of the Christ. And there is no situation, there's really no situation that isn't legitimate as far as we're concerned. there isn't a single call that can be made upon us that we can rightly refuse. When you stop to think that we are not being called upon either to produce babies or stop them being produced, or we are not being called upon to increase the liquor business or decrease it, in every one of those cases we are really being asked to reveal the omnipresence of the Christ so that it may make the necessary adjustment in human experience that will reveal harmony. I have in mind just such an experience when many years ago a young woman came to my office in tears because she was about to have a family, or knew that she was to have a family, and couldn't see where it fit into the picture. And I took that call very seriously, not from the standpoint of what she was implying, but from the standpoint that probably above all people, this one needed most the touch of the Christ, the touch of the Spirit, and it proved so to be. Because when quiet was felt, when peace was felt, some days later an inner unfoldment took place, this woman realized the nature of the gift that she was to receive, and in the years that have gone by since then, it has proven to be just exactly that, a gift of God, which at the moment wasn't understood and only became understood in the light of what the Christ must have revealed in her consciousness. In the same way, I had a man many years ago who was a bank teller and who left the bank with $20,000 of the bank's money and never was caught. But when his time came for a realization, and I had the opportunity to spend 6 months working with this man, the most wonderful experience came out of it for him, for his wife, for the bank, for a judge who eventually handled that case and allowed that man to go free. And quite some years later, that man was able to receive from his own state a license as a certified public accountant. And those licenses are very rare in such cases. If we learn not to sit in judgment on men and women and their offenses, but to see all of them as really a call for the Christ, a demand for the Christ, we will then find that those who make the call are not really seeking to evade responsibility or punishment, but rather to find a spiritual adjustment that not only will take care of that immediate problem, but their entire life's history. I wish there were some way that I could convey to you this idea of which I'm speaking. I wish there was some way of being sure that you catch this point, that ours is not a ministry that has to do with the healing of sickness, nor the reforming of sinners, nor the overcoming of sin. That is the way the claims are presented to us. That is the way the demand is made upon us. But if we yield to the temptation to be concerned about fevers or lumps or blisters, we do then become materia medica. If we permit ourselves to give advice in marital affairs or parental affairs or business affairs, we do become human counselors. But we in this work have no right to do those things. We have no right to advise marriage or divorce or separation. We have no right to advise going into business or going out of business. We have no right to advise how business should be conducted, whether lawsuits should be or should not be. Our function, regardless of the name or nature of the claim that is presented to us, is instantly to remember that we are being called on for the demonstration of the Christ. If you were to go to Jesus Christ, knowing as much truth as you know now, you would never think of him as either a physician or a counselor, but as a revelator of the Christ. And so in the wisdom that you have gained through study, you would more likely go to him and say, just let me sit here until I feel or see or realize the Christ. That will be enough, because I know that that realization of the Christ will make any and every necessary adjustment in my affairs, even to lifting me out of humanhood into my spiritual identity. Probably when you call upon a practitioner or teacher for help, you still use the language of the original metaphysics, that is, to say, I have a fever, will you do some work, or I have a blister, or I'm unemployed. But even if you use that language, the time has come for you to know that when you call upon a spiritual minister, actually you are expecting that minister to reveal a spiritual presence and power in your affairs. You are looking to that one to reveal Christ, and then let the Christ multiply loaves and fishes if that is the need, or raise the dead, open the eyes of the blind, unstop the ears of the deaf. But when you are called upon, then is the time when you have to rise even higher than when you ask for help. When you are called upon, you dare not think in terms of healing a cold or relieving one. You dare not allow your thought to enter the physical realm, because if you have accepted the responsibilities of this ministry, you are saying to the world, my kingdom is not of this world. Don't ask me for anything in this world, not even anything good. Of course, you won't say that to the one who calls upon you, because in their state of consciousness, that would be no answer to make. They wouldn't understand what you're talking about, and you could cause more confusion than benefit. That would be like saying to a person in severe pain, oh, you haven't got a pain, it isn't real. Now, you wouldn't like that said to you if you were in severe pain, and you have no right to say it to anyone else. It can only aggravate, it can't benefit. If you were convinced of the unreality of pain, of disease, you would say, of course, I'll help you immediately. And then your understanding or your awareness of the unreal nature of disease and pain would bring the necessary relief, and your patient would say, I have no more pain. That would be fine when your patient says it, but don't you tell it to the patient. So it is that you will not say to anyone who asks you for help, oh, it isn't my function to make a sick person well or a poor person supplied, because their rightful answer will be, then why does your literature talk about healing and supplying? No, the language of the human world is still our language. It may not be yours and mine in the privacy of a closed class. We ourselves may have come to the point, and some have, where they would never dream of speaking of a physical, mental, moral, or financial situation and asking for help, but would merely ask for help, would merely ask for a lift, would merely ask that Christ be realized. But that wouldn't give you the right to talk, to use that language to the beginner. Your answer would be, of course I'll help you, or let us meditate, let us unite in the Spirit for the realization of Christ or truth or God. Anything that would give assurance and comfort to the sick one or weary one or poor one. But within yourself, and that's what I'm speaking of tonight, within yourself, do not permit yourself to come down to the level of physical, mental, moral, or financial manipulation. You, in the inner sanctuary of your own being, must always know that regardless of the nature of the demand made upon you, that the real demand is for the realization and demonstration of the Christ. When you can be still and feel a spiritual presence or hear the still small voice, then you are a spiritual minister and your work has been performed. Your function has been performed and your work is complete. You do not have to know any truth about the body. You do not have to know any truth about organs and functions or actions. You do not have to know any truth except whatever truth you can bring to remembrance about the nature of God, the unreal nature of anything that does not testify to God. And then be still and wait. And when that still small voice assures you of its presence, or when any form of peace and quiet comes to give you assurance, your work is done, and the patient will feel the response. If they do not feel it the first time, they will ask for help a second time. They may ask for help for a whole year before they come into the realization, because every realization of the Christ on your part is making some necessary adjustment in their consciousness, a necessary adjustment before Christ can be revealed to them. Christ can never be revealed to mortal or material consciousness. Christ can never be revealed to the materialistic mind. And so it is that what your realization of the Christ is doing is really spiritualizing the thought and consciousness of the one who has turned to you for help, until it is so spiritualized that it can behold the inner vision. If we were to go back 2,000 years and ask ourselves why only about 500 people are accredited with having witnessed the risen Jesus, why there were multitudes at the crucifixion, multitudes who saw it, but only 500 who witnessed the bodily resurrection, the answer is this. When Jesus stepped out of that tomb, he stepped out of it in the same form that you and I will step out of our tombs when we outwardly seem to pass on. In other words, there isn't one of us that will ever remain in a tomb longer than 3 days. Most of us will never even get into the tomb. We will have arisen before even the burial takes place. But Do not expect all your friends and relatives to witness you walking the earth again. Only those attuned to spiritual vision will be able to see you on earth when all of the others are sure they have left you out at the cemetery. You won't be there. You won't even start out there. As a matter of fact, the Master wouldn't have been in the tomb 3 days except that he chose to be for the demonstration. You see, in the Hebrew faith, the spirit hovers around, is supposed to hover around, for 3 days after death. And so, had he appeared visibly before the 3 days, they would never have believed that he died. So he had to die for 3 days in order to be accepted as really dead, in the same way that he couldn't go to Lazarus' tomb until the 4th day. Because had he raised him on the 2nd or 3rd day, they would have said, as our good friends would today, oh, well, you see, he never really died. He still was around. It was only the 1st or 2nd day or 3rd, and so that wasn't difficult. But by the 4th day, even to the Hebrew faith, you're officially dead. And I presume that with us, if someone should raise us from the dead before the embalming, the excuse will be, well, he wasn't really dead, you see. But if we first permit the embalming and then raise from the dead, they will have to admit we really were as dead. Now then, those in that frame of mind will never believe that we were resurrected. Never. They are so completely convinced of death that they cannot accept resurrection except as a curiosity that they would like to see but never will see. I had an experience one night with a man. I had talked that night for about 6 hours to a group of inquirers, and many of them were pretty well convinced that I had something or was saying something true. But one of these men said, "You nearly had me convinced." But then I remembered how much you talked about healing, spiritual healing, and of course that woke me up. I knew that was impossible. There is no such thing as spiritual healing, and you know it as well as I do. Nobody could ever be healed by prayer unless they had the aid of doctors and medicines, to which there was no answer, except that he said, "You couldn't really prove a healing, could you?" And I said, "No, that's absolutely right. I never could prove it." Ah, you see, I was right. Just expecting us to believe something that you can't prove. No, I said, you can't prove it. There's scripture for that authority, that though you raise them from the dead, they will not believe. That's very right. That's very correct. I cannot prove it. I can say this to you, that those who experience a healing need no proof. Those who do not experience a healing cannot accept any proof, even the raising of the dead. If you at any time should experience healing, you also would need no proof. And he said, Me? Wait a minute. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, and I didn't want to come here tonight. When I got home from my work, I was tired, I was exhausted, and told my wife I couldn't come. And she said, out of respect, I had to come. And I've been here 6 hours tonight listening, and I'm not tired, and I'm not weary. I've had a healing. That really took place. Well, if you can accept the fact that you can't see me, even looking up here you can't see me, all you can see is my body, my form. But you can't see me because I'm way up here looking out at you. And I can't see you. I can see your faces, I can see parts of your body, but I can't see you because you also are way up there looking out at me. You're somewhere way in back of your eyes where I can't see you, and that's you. And you may be assured of this, that if your bodies were lying on the floor, you'd still be up there looking out at us. Because this you is not encased in that frame. That you is as external to your body as I am, and I am as God. Now just remember that. You are as external to that body as I am, and I am is God. You see, we are not form, nor are we in a form, but the real identity of us animates this form, and if you were to destroy it, we would immediately animate another one. For the simple reason that that of us which is I can raise a new temple 3 days from now, 3 minutes, 3 hours from now. There is no such thing as death to any individual. And that which we call the death of the form is an experience that comes to us only because of a universal acceptance of birth, maturity, and death. As a matter of fact, your body does die. As a matter of fact, your body has died many, many times since you were born. There probably isn't a drop of blood in you at this moment that was in you a year or two ago. There probably isn't a pore of your skin or a hair of your head that you had a few years ago. Every single part of us is being built and rebuilt, dying and being reborn, just like every part of a tree. The form of a tree is continually dying, but the life of the tree is continually raising up the new form. And every tree has a new form in every cycle of time. So do we have a new body, whether it's every year, as some physicians have said, or every 3 years, as others have said. There is no doubt that every part of us is dying, that is, of our forms, every moment. And some we're doing away with. Nails, hair, sloughing off skin. We really are destroying or removing parts of our own body all of the time, but the rest of it nature is taking care of. And yet, because the body dies, and because the body is renewed, there is no death process to you or me. We aren't even aware of either the dying process or the rebirthing of the body. We just ignore all of that. And so it is that we could go on unto eternity, letting our body die every year or two, and having new blood formed, new skin, new bones, new flesh, new muscles, and never go through the death process or passing on process. It is said in Scripture that the last enemy that shall be overcome is death. The Master, Christ Jesus, said that it was his mission to raise the dead. Again it says in Scripture, God hath no pleasure in your dying, turn ye and live. So therefore you must know that death is no part of anyone's existence. Our acceptance and experience of a passing on process is but our acceptance of a universal belief so strong that we're told that it is the last enemy that will be overcome. And probably it is so. It may take many, many generations before we come to the place of saying, I need not die. I take no pleasure in my dying. I is God. I raise up this temple every 3 years, every 3 days, every 3 months. I am continuously renewing this body. I, the Christ of God, the reality of me, is forever about the Father's business of sloughing off and rebirthing, renewing, restoring, resurrecting. When that day comes, it will have to bring with it, of course, the realization that there is no such thing as old age, because just living a lot more years and carrying around a weak, decrepit body for somebody else to bathe or feed or support wouldn't add much to the comfort of the world. So it is that along with our realization of life eternal will have to come a realization of an activity to either take the place of earning a living or a way of continuing a higher form of activity. It is very much like what the world has been going through in this past generation and now has to look forward to in the next generation. That is, the reduction of the ordinary work week from 48 hours to 36, and now the possibility of 30 hours. And with no reason why it shouldn't come. The only tragedy would be if it came before men knew what to do with those extra hours that they weren't employed. It would be a tragedy if it came during these days of television and wrestling matches and boxing matches and detective stories and confidential magazines. It would be a horrible thing to look forward to, wouldn't it, that men would have 6 more hours a week to indulge themselves in those things? But so it is with us. It would be a terrible thing, too, for us to demonstrate life eternal and not be satisfied with raising our families, start in to raise our grandchildren, then decide we're now alive, we'll have to take over the great-grandchildren, too. No, we will have to learn some activity, more than likely a spiritual activity, so that we can leave our human activities, the human world, and live in such a way as to open the eyes of the blind, raise the dead, so that all men may come into the period of resurrection and ascension. Well, the point, I suppose, is this. I hadn't thought of it until this second, that this is the week of resurrection, isn't it? The Holy Week. And probably that brought it to light. Because resurrection is much more than just lifting ourselves out of a tomb and then walking the earth again. Probably there was a good reason for the Master doing it, but there would be no reason for our doing it except as a circus performance. If we are to demonstrate the resurrection so that the world may benefit, we will have to do it before the period called death, before the period called transition or passing on. Because already, you may be assured of this, that even though to sense you appear to pass on, your resurrection is assured in far less than 3 days. You will never be entombed. You will never be buried. You will never be cremated. That will never happen to you. So that you do not have to make the demonstration of resurrection. It is already made for you. And your making it will not convince anybody on earth unless some spiritually illumined person seeing it is merely given another proof of it. Aside from that, it will have no value to the world. But if if you can prove resurrection here and now, if you can prove that your body dies every year, that you drop nails and hair and skin, and probably unseen to your eyesight, muscle, flesh, bones, and that your body is renewed year by year, so that you go on in youth, vitality, strength, maturity, in the fullness of maturity, in the fullness of mental faculties, in the fullness of harmony, then you will be showing forth something to the world, just like some of those who many of us have known, who have been active in their metaphysical and spiritual work when they were in the 80s, when they were in the 90s, when they were at 99 and 100, showing forth the full vigor of manhood and womanhood. Those have done something toward showing the world the possibilities of a resurrection and an ascension without the experience of death. At our present stage of unfoldment, there is a call that each one of us leave this plane of existence. In the present world set up, if you will, that way, nature set up, there seems to be no purpose for our remaining on earth indefinitely, visible to human sight, so that to every man and to every woman in this present age and in the foreseeable future, there will be a transition from earthly sight. The world may call it death or passing, but it will not be that, and you will know that by the fact that they do not get kicked out of the body, they walk out of the body. We will not lie around in endless years of torture and then give up the ghost, but we will quickly and painlessly walk out to our next experience, because our next experience is one that is absent from human sight. Whether that will always be, personally I doubt. I'm sure the day will come, I'm convinced inwardly that the day will come when the world will continue endlessly visible to each other, that we will never age past the point of maturity, and that we will maintain the full vigor of maturity throughout all time. But that time isn't here now, because we are still dealing with time and space and the question of how will so many live on earth when the earth is limited to so many miles in circumference. It will only be when it is discovered that the world is not 25,000 miles around, and it isn't, but it will only be when it is discovered that we will all realize there is a place for all of us to continue forever. And that you can only realize in proportion as you look in the mirror and realize that you aren't standing there in form, that you are looking out at yourself from behind your eyes, and that you isn't occupying space. As a matter of fact, you will learn one day that that you is me, that that you is all of us, that all of us really isn't all of us at all. It's only one of us, but that one is God. And then you'll see why it will not be necessary for anyone to pass from here to there, visible or invisible. Do you know how the original story of reincarnation was created? Back in the very earliest experience in India, in in the very first days of religious teachings, it was taught that people die and go to heaven. Sooner or later, everyone reached heaven. And of course, you know from the questions that are asked you what questions would be asked of those priests and ministers. Now, if everybody dies on earth, that makes room for others to come on earth. But if everybody goes to heaven and stays there, how do they have room up there? And that was a puzzler until someone thought out the idea of reincarnation. And so now it's permitted to empty out heaven every once in a while and send them down to earth, make more room for others to come up. So it is, if we get a little bit too logical, we may have to give such reasons, but all such questions and answers disappear when you have either looked in a mirror or looked up here at me and come to the realization that you can't see me, that I'm the fellow sitting behind these eyes looking out. And then you start first to wonder what part of the brain I'm in, because that posits having a brain, doesn't it? The mystery is when you get past that and realize that there is no place inside of this frame where I am. No place inside of this frame. And then you'll know that there is only one of us in this room, and that one is God, appearing visibly as different states and stages of consciousness called you and me, all destined, however, ultimately to return to the Father's house, that is, to the Father consciousness, to the consciousness that I am. Well, can you not see then that the Hebrews of 2,000 years ago were unable to accept resurrection because there was no visible form for them to see? The I that I am being invisible, it takes spiritual apprehension to discern it, to see it, to know it. And those of you who have not yet had the experience, I will tell you that eventually you will have this experience. There are many in this room who have already experienced it. When a practitioner on the spiritual path is asked for help, and they sit in silence and quietness, waiting for the inflow of the Spirit, it is very often given to them to behold you as you are, to behold the spiritual identity, the spiritual entity, actually to see you as you are in God's image and likeness. It is an experience that comes often, very often, to the teacher working with students. When teachers work with students and have a great deal of meditation work with them, it happens in many cases that the teacher finally comes to an actual apprehension of the true identity of the student, and that is what wakes the student into spiritual realization from a dormant state of humanhood. In India, that is called the guru system, where the spiritually illumined teacher, being with and meditating with the student over a number of years, finally reaches right through to the center of that student's being, and there beholds the Son of God. And in beholding the Son of God, awakens him to his spiritual realization. Now that is what happens in our work here. Whenever I have the opportunity of working with students over a number of years, not that it always takes years, it eventually happens that the two become one. The consciousness of the teacher beholds the consciousness of the student and wakens it. And from that moment on, they are free in their own spiritual light, consciously one with God, no longer needing teacher or teaching, since now they are able to receive their impartations from the Spirit. It is only in this present state of our spiritual ignorance that these experiences are rare. Well, they're rare because there are not many Occidental teachers who have achieved that conscious union that makes this possible. That's number one. In days to come, there will be more such teachers. Number two, there are not many students anxious enough or desirous enough for that experience to set aside their lives to achieve it, because it isn't something that comes for spare time or spare change. The way is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter in. It requires devotion, wholehearted devotion, not for any reason, because there's no benefit to be gained so far as the world is concerned. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. In gaining this, you lose the world. And so it is that there are not many who have realized that there is a spiritual kingdom called my kingdom, that there is a peace that has nothing to do with an amount of money or an amount of honors or an amount of grandchildren or an amount of something else that is of this world. A peace that transcends anything known to human sense. The few students of the Occident who have realized that such an experience is possible have embarked on that search for God realization. And nothing is going to prevent their success, because they have reached a stage where nothing less would satisfy them. Now, that doesn't mean ignoring our duties or family responsibilities. It means coming into such spiritual demonstration that these fall into line, making everything else possible. It doesn't mean running away from our families and chasing off to India for a master or anywhere else in the world for a teacher. It means praying within so seriously, so in such consecration, that the Spirit within them opens out a pathway for them to find their teacher or their teaching wherever these may be. To the average person coming into metaphysics, it is enough that metaphysical help or spiritual help will take away the ills of the flesh or the sins of the flesh or the lacks of the purse. And therefore, most people rest on that rung of the ladder. They have achieved their heart's desire. The disease is gone, the lack is gone, the unhappiness is gone. Now we can start to enjoy life, this world's life. There are some not satisfied with achieving the peace that all may understand, but rather seek the peace that passeth understanding, that seek the peace that this world can never give, regardless of how harmonious it is, but seek only my peace. There are those who are satisfied to find a law, if necessary a law of matter or a law of mind or a law of spirit, that will overcome the ills of the flesh. But there are others who could never rest while they are under any law, even a good one, who can never rest until they're under grace, where law cannot operate. Such is the spiritual path. Its goal is resurrection and ascension. Resurrection from a tomb to walk the earth will prove little or nothing to anyone. If I saw all of the people in all of the cemeteries rise up and walk the earth, I promise you it would be meaningless to me. I already know it's so, and so it would prove nothing. And the rest of the world won't see it even as it happens. To you who have opened yourselves to the spiritual path, I say this, as I said last night, I believe, to make friends, begin to recognize the Christ seated behind the eyes of every individual, sitting on the heart of every individual, constituting the soul of every individual. So it will be as you follow this work, as you look through the physical appearance of men and women to the eye that sits way back here looking out at you, as you look through their claims of sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, color, race, creed, religion, and behold an invisible presence, you will have an actual experience of witnessing a resurrection. It may be at some funeral that you attend. It may be in some other form, but as you practice looking through the appearance to the invisible presence, you will have the same opportunity that Jesus presented 2,000 years ago to his followers. Those of you who have eyes to see and ears to hear, in 3 days I will walk this earth again. And he gave them the opportunity to see it, and the Christ will give you that same opportunity to witness the resurrection. At first, it may be the resurrection of someone whom you call a sinner, and it may be their resurrection into sainthood. It may be the resurrection of a dying person lifted up into spiritual health. Because you must remember that this spiritual path of ours is made up in this age mostly of the living dead and the sinners. Our practitioners and teachers of today have all either been at death's door, or very sick, or very sinful, or very poor. They are all bearing witness to resurrection from some very low states of humanhood, virtually dead states of humanhood. As a matter of fact, if you were to investigate the history of the practitioners and teachers who are really known for good healing works, who are really known for living spiritual lives, you will usually find that they are individuals who have either been at death's door physically, morally, or financially, and have been raised up again by the power of the Spirit and lifted up into newness of life, so that now when you look at them, you are looking at what the world calls saints. They weren't always that way. They were dead in sins, or dead in disease, or dead in poverty, but now they are alive again in spirit. You may witness that form of resurrection before you witness the other form. That is, actually witness those who have passed on being raised up again. That experience lies before you if you are serious enough, if you go far enough in your meditations, not in your conversation about truth and not in your discussions about truth, because I can assure you that none of these things will ever be revealed to you through discussing truth with anyone or talking about it with anyone. These things will only be revealed to you as you stop discussing truth, stop talking about it, and begin to live with your own inner being. The fewer words you use of truth on the outer plane, the greater evidence there will be to your attainment on the inner plane until such time comes as you are imparting truth to a student. But trying to convince someone, or trying to sell someone, or trying to give it to someone can only result in your losing it yourself. When you are called upon to present a spiritual message to others who seem to be in need, confine yourself to the fewest possible words. Let them give some indication of their interest by being willing to read something or hear something, but not from you. The least part that you play in it, the greater part you give to the Spirit to influence them, instead of you humanly convincing them. Convincing them may prove difficult. We used to hear a story in Hollywood about a man who was very ill with tuberculosis, and his friend didn't like to see that he was so close to death's door without trying spiritual means, and so he told him about Christian Science, invited him to go to a Christian Science testimony meeting and learn what prayer could do. And so one night this man went to our big church out there in Hollywood, and lo and behold, a testimony was given by a man who was cured of this belief of tuberculosis. Of course, on leaving the church, this friend said, "Now, you see, you heard that right there yourself. That man was healed of tuberculosis." "Oh, no, he wasn't. I heard distinctly. He had a belief, but I really have it." It isn't easy to convince anyone. More especially if we get absolute in our language. No, in recommending this path or help to others, let us use a minimum of words and give them the opportunity to evince an interest by responding to some reading matter or something like it. And of course, remember this: even discussing truth with a practitioner or teacher isn't really and truly receiving truth. A student receives truth from a teacher when the student sits silently listening and then gets up silently and goes home. But when the student is permitted to answer back and ask questions and discuss, the whole situation is now on the human plane, all on the mental plane, on the intellectual plane, and no teaching takes place. Spiritual teaching is an impartation from within an enlightened consciousness to a receptive consciousness. So, if you must hear the word spoken, go to your practitioner, go to your teacher, and sit in silence and hear and then get up and go. Don't answer back and don't ask questions. If questions are to be asked, state them, get the answer, but don't discuss them. Don't come back with an if, and, or but. That is not spiritual teaching, nor is it spiritual learning. The attitude for spiritual teaching is that the teacher is at that moment the master. The student is at that moment the student. And no student who is a true student will ever believe that they know enough to discuss truth with a teacher. No teacher will ever believe that truth can be learned by discussion, by conversation, by the question and answer method. It can only be by impartation of the word to the receptive thought.